Melbourne, Australia, January 1921. The world was still recovering from the Great War. A new decade had just begun, and the city of Melbourne was bustling with the optimism of the roaring 20s. Horse-drawn carts clattered alongside early motorcars. Newsboys shouted from corners, and children in straw hats played along cobblestone streets. But behind the cheerful hum of city life, a tragedy was about to unfold, one that would shatter public trust, ruin an innocent man's life, and stain Australia's justice system for generations. Before we begin this story of tragedy, corruption, and redemption, make sure to subscribe to Crimes Through Time, and if you're passionate about uncovering the truth behind history's most shocking injustices, hit the like button. It helps others discover these forgotten crimes from the past. Now, let's step into the narrow laneways of 1922 Melbourne and the dark story of the Gun Alley murder. It began on a warm summer day, December 30th, 1921. A 12-year-old girl named Alma Tirtschke set out to run an errand for her aunt. She was quiet, polite, and well-liked in her community, the kind of child people described as sensible and dependable. Her task was simple: buy some meat and pick up a parcel from the local butcher. She promised to return by 2 o'clock p.m, but as the afternoon faded and the lamps flickered on along Collins Street, Alma never came home. Her disappearance sent ripples through the neighborhood. By nightfall, her family was frantic. They searched the nearby lanes and alleys, calling her name. Neighbors joined in, police were notified, and word spread quickly. But it wasn't until the next morning, on the last day of the year, that the horror was discovered. In a narrow, grimy laneway known as Gun Alley officially, Little Collins Street, a delivery boy made a sickening discovery. Behind a warehouse, in a corner between crates and rubbish, lay the body of young Alma Tirtschke. She had been assaulted and strangled. Her hat was missing. Her hair was tangled. Her school dress was torn. The city was horrified. Newspapers printed bold, black headlines: "Schoolgirl murdered in City Alley within hours." Public outrage turned to hysteria. Who could commit such a crime in broad daylight, in the heart of Melbourne? The police were under immense pressure to find the killer, and fast. But what began as a desperate search for justice quickly turned into a witch hunt. Detectives soon claimed they had a suspect, a 35-year-old man named Colin Campbell Ross. Ross was a wine saloon owner who ran a modest bar on Bourke Street called the Australian Wine-saloon. He was known for being rough around the edges but generally harmless. He employed a few staff, lived above the shop, and had a reputation for serving Melbourne's working class and vagrants. He had minor run-ins with the law, mostly for liquor offences, nothing violent, nothing serious. But to the police, Ross fit their idea of the type. He was single, poor, and lived near the crime scene. From the moment detectives laid eyes on him, they decided he was guilty. Witnesses came forward, or rather, were found, who claimed they saw a young girl near Ross's saloon that afternoon. Some said she'd gone inside. Others weren't sure. Details were fuzzy, but police pressed on. When Ross protested his innocence, police took it as defiance. Within days, they arrested him for the murder of Alma Tirtschke. The public, already whipped into a frenzy, cheered the news. "Murderer caught," screamed the headlines. But behind those triumphant words lay one of the most shameful miscarriages of justice in Australian history. The case against Ross was built not on evidence, but on desperation. There were no fingerprints, no physical proof linking him to Alma's body, and no credible eyewitness who could place her in his bar. What the prosecution did have was a handful of unreliable witnesses and a supposed confession that never actually happened. Among the witnesses was a convicted criminal named Ivy Matthews, who had worked briefly for Ross and despised him. She told police that Ross had once made improper remarks about girls. Another was a woman named Julia Gibson, better known by her nickname Madame Gurkha, a fortune teller and brothel keeper. She claimed Ross had confessed the murder to her, a claim that would later fall apart under scrutiny. Still, the police were determined, and to make their case stronger, they found one more key witness, a man named John Harding, a jailhouse informant who said Ross had confessed to him while in custody. Harding was promised leniency and reward money, a dangerous mix for truth. The press took the bait. They painted Ross as a monster, splashing his face across newspapers, calling him the Gun Alley Killer. In a time before television, newspapers were the voice of the people, and their voice was merciless. When Ross's trial began in February 1922, the courtroom was packed. Curious citizens, journalists, and even socialites came to watch. The evidence was weak, the witnesses shaky, but the emotional weight of the crime, a murdered schoolgirl, was enough to sway the jury before the first week was over. The defense attorney, Thomas Brennan, fought valiantly. He pointed out inconsistencies in the testimony, contradictions in the timeline, and the complete absence of forensic proof. He argued that Ross had been in his bar serving customers all afternoon, and that Alma was seen alive after she supposedly met him. But it was no use. Public outrage demanded a conviction, and the prosecution played on emotion rather than fact. When the jury retired to deliberate, it took them just over 3 hours to return their verdict: guilty. On April 26, 1922, Colin Campbell Ross was sentenced to death by hanging. As the judge read the sentence, Ross shouted from the dock, "I am innocent. I swear before God I am an innocent man." But no one listened. The weeks that followed were filled with appeals and petitions. Thomas Brennan tried desperately to halt the execution, gathering new statements and pointing out flaws in the forensic evidence particularly. The hair samples that police claimed matched those found on Alma's body. But forensic science in the 1920s was primitive at best, and police experts were far from reliable. Ross's family and supporters pleaded for mercy, but the government was unmoved. The public, whipped up by months of sensational headlines, wanted closure. On April 24, 1922, just 4 months after Alma's death, Ross was led to the gallows at Melbourne jail. He maintained his innocence to the very end. His final words were chilling in their calm conviction: "Innocent, and the truth will someday be known." The trapdoor opened. His life ended. He was 28 years old. The execution was botched. The hangman miscalculated the drop, and Ross died slowly, strangled rather than swiftly killed. Even in death, the system failed him. For decades afterward, the Gun Alley murder was spoken of in hushed tones. Officially, the case was closed, the killer executed, justice served. But to many, especially those who'd followed the trial closely, something felt terribly wrong. Then, years later, strange things began to surface. Witnesses recanted, new evidence appeared, and the man who'd once been the most hated in Melbourne slowly became a symbol of Australia's flawed justice system. In the 1990s, nearly 70 years after Ross's execution, the case was reopened thanks to the persistence of researchers and descendants who believed in his innocence. The key piece of evidence, the hair samples used to convict him, was still preserved. Modern DNA testing had advanced far beyond anything imaginable in 1922, and forensic experts decided to re-examine them. The results were devastating. The hair samples that supposedly linked Ross to Alma's body were not a match. In fact, they came from 2 different people entirely. The science that sealed his fate had been completely wrong. In 2008, 86 years after his hanging, Colin Campbell Ross was officially pardoned by the Victorian government. It was the first posthumous pardon in Australian history for a capital crime. The government acknowledged what so many had long suspected, that Ross had been wrongfully convicted and executed for a crime he did not commit. His remains were exhumed from the prison yard and reburied beside his family, finally given the dignity denied to him in life. The true killer of Alma Tirtschke was never found. Theories abound. Some say she was lured away by an older man, others that she was a victim of predation by strangers in the city's underworld. But no one can say for sure. The case remains officially unsolved. What we do know is that the Gun Alley murder changed Australia forever. It sparked debates about police corruption, media influence, and the reliability of eyewitness testimony. It also highlighted the dangers of rushing to justice in the heat of public outrage, a lesson that still resonates today. For the people of Melbourne, Gun Alley became more than just a place. It became a symbol, a narrow lane where truth was strangled, where justice failed, and where an innocent man's last breath became a haunting reminder of the cost of human error. Even now, if you walk through the heart of Melbourne, the modern city hums above what was once Gun Alley, now renamed and repaved, its grim history buried beneath glass towers and CAFS. Most people pass without knowing the dark story beneath their feet. But those who do remember, the historians, the families, the storytellers, know that beneath those polished streets lies the memory of a little girl named Alma, and the ghost of a man who died proclaiming his innocence. Time has a way of revealing truth, even when the world refuses to listen. Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If this story moved you, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest injustices. And tell us in the comments, do you believe justice was truly served? Or was Colin Campbell Ross another victim of fear and flawed investigation? We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay curious, stay safe.